Well, yes, there are some feeble. I would caution against any optimistic and premature conclusions and hopes. But there are some feeble signs that the Russian army is having to withdraw some of its troops from that area, not from the Donbas, where the hottest spots of this war are right now, but from Kharkiv, simply because Vladimir Putin lacks the sufficient force to protect its long borders, including with Ukraine. And that's one of the actual goals of this operation. We don't have a clear vision of its strategic goals as of yet, but it's already demonstrated how Vladimir Putin's fixation with Ukraine has left his own borders, Russia's borders, essentially unprotected and undefended.
As you say, it's difficult to know what the long-term goal is here, but do you think that Ukraine can achieve anything with this incursion into Russia?
Our former Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzhny said as early as 2 years ago that unless Russians start to feel the brunt of this war at home, nothing will change. This is essentially a breach of Vladimir Putin's contract with the Russians. You stay out of politics, we provide you with good economy, we provide you with security. Yes, the population of Russia has lost its agency. It doesn't decide much, but every such successive wave of mobilization for Vladimir Putin, every such clear, failure of security brings these, unhappiness to these chattering masses. And if Vladimir Putin is pushed to order another wave of mobilization to try to plug these holes. I mean, mind you, these are conscripts. They're not paid, unlike these other mercenaries. This will create a sense of injustice. This will create significant risks for the ruling elite.
Yeah, because Moscow, it's insisting that everything is under control, Putin referring vaguely to a situation in the border region. Is the Kremlin then succeeding in playing down the significance of this offensive to the domestic audience in Russia?
Well, of course, even as tightly controlled as the media in Russia currently are, Vladimir Putin cannot hide the true picture of what's happening in Kursk from his population. That's why his state-controlled TV channels have actually had to comment somewhat about what's happening, even though now they're apparently going into this mode of denial, nothing to see here, move along, etc. But once again, we're talking about hundreds of young conscripts who've already been taken prisoners. They all have families, they have circles of friends, etc. This will obviously create a very unpleasant situation for Vladimir Putin, no matter how hard he tries to hide this from his population.
Yeah, because he often seems slow to respond to moments of crisis. But what kind of response do you think we're going to see from him in the longer term?
Well, I mean, obviously he's going to try to kick the Ukrainians out, but that can come at a very huge cost. Vladimir Putin has once again not given up on his obsession with controlling at least the eastern part of Ukraine and completing the capture of the Donbas until at least the end of the year. Meanwhile, he will continue putting screws on the media. We're already seeing that Russia is in full earnest about trying to shut down fully YouTube in Russia. So more of the same, more tightening of the screws, and we're seeing signs that his regime is growing senile, increasingly autocratic, and increasingly out of step.
And meanwhile, Peter, US media reports had been suggesting that the warring sides, they were going to be holding indirect talks perhaps on a deal to halt strikes on energy infrastructure. Those plans seemingly derailed by this counter-offensive. But does this indicate that there is some kind of shift underway in Ukrainian thinking about the war?
Well, yes, indeed, at least until Kursk, which this operation has been more successful than anyone really thought. That injected a new kind of, level of optimism on the part of both the army, the military, and people behind the front lines. Be that as it may, yes, there is fatigue with this war, and there's a bit of a shifting popular attitude about the possibility of potential negotiations. This idea of secret negotiations happening somewhere in Qatar would have been anathema 2 years ago, a year ago. Now I think the population is getting more amenable to the idea that Sooner or later, this has to stop, and there may be some territorial concessions that have to be made, even though, once again, this is not yet has not yet received official sanction. Any talk about territorial concessions.
It might be hard to say at this point, but do you think that the Ukrainians, that they've gained any leverage for any future negotiations by beginning this incursion, by crossing into Russian territory?
That is indeed one of the probably main calculations of this Operation Kursk. There's perfect symmetry in this. You have went on an offensive and captured hundreds of square kilometers of Kharkiv. I'm talking about a few months ago. We have done the same just across the border in Kursk. You want us to leave Kursk? You leave Kharkiv. Maybe you leave Crimea. Once again, whether that will play out this way, I'm not sure. Vladimir Putin is clearly not sending any signals that he would be ready for that sort of trade-off. But if Ukrainians get entrenched in Kursk, if they show that it's going to be very difficult to knock them out, Putin is going to have to make some hard choices.